Lasse.
Hello,
And
Saroja.
hi, Genesis. Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. Thank you so much for being with us. So we're going to jump right in. I just want to say a few introductory words about both of you for everyone who is tuning in. Um, the Lasse Brunn is the executive director of 50 by 40 and a lifelong animal friend and a compassionate vegan. And you've actually gotten to hear some of his words. So I'm going to do a much shorter introduction for Lasse because his work and what he does is part of 50 by 40. Genesis, you might be new to some folks and a superstar for other folks who are attending here. But in trying to find a way to introduce you, I actually was on your Instagram account and saw a really lovely message from your mom, which I think is probably the best way to introduce what you do and how you do it. And she just speaks with such pride. Your mom said, "Happy 14th birthday." This is a couple of weeks ago. "Even before birth, I knew Genesis was a one of a kind. She started walking at 7 months, started talking when she was 1, and she stopped eating animals when she was 4. She started kindergarten that same year. When she was 6, she went vegan on her own, and shortly after became an activist because she wanted to make a difference for animals. At the age of 8, she started public speaking. When she was 9, she decided to be homeschooled because she wanted to have time to focus on her education and animal advocacy. When she was 10, she gave a TED Talk, and by the age of 11, she had started Genesis for Animals. I'm going to help, you're going to help us fill in the blanks on some of that, but what a lovely birthday message. It just goes on and on from there about your engagement. So the first thing I'm going to ask, Genesis, I hope you will be okay with it if I begin with you. I would love to fill in the blanks on some of that story. So you are a little kid, only 4 years old, and you start to have these ideas that you want to eat differently. Can you tell me how on earth that began for you so early?
Well, from a young age, I've always loved animals. I think everyone's born with the love for animals naturally. And then I started wondering what we were eating because at first, like, I didn't really put it together. Like, it's in the name, like chicken nuggets, but I didn't really think like it's a chicken. So then that's when I asked her, and she told me that it actually was like the bird, and I couldn't eat it anymore. I didn't want to eat it anymore. So me and her went vegetarian first, and then after that, I found out about the dairy industry because I asked her what I was drinking because the milk wasn't coming from her. She just had my sister then. So I asked her, and that's when she told me that we got it from mom cow. So then I couldn't drink it anymore because then I looked at it like that's like if someone just came in our house and then took your milk and gave it to humans, you wouldn't like that. So why are we doing that to another species? So then after that, my whole family ended up going vegan with me. And then I became an activist after that because I knew like I was doing something good for the animals by not eating them, but I just wanted to do more about that. And then that's when my mom told me like of what I could do, but she didn't really know at the time because like she's never like thought of becoming an activist before that. But she knew a couple of animal rights groups, so she just reached out to them and was like, "Oh, like I have my daughter and she wants to become an activist. So what can she do?" And that's when they told her like I can become an animal rights activist. So I wanted to do that, and then that's when I started going to protests and demos, and then after that, I got contacted by TEDx to give a TED talk, and that's when I found out that veganism had to do with so many more things than just the animals. So that's when I started talking about the climate because I realized about how much of an impact that's having right now. And that's really when I started becoming an environmentalist is when I realized of how this, like, I didn't know, like, I felt like how come no one told me about this? Because like all of a sudden I knew like animal agriculture is harming our planet so much, but no one talks about it. So that's when I started talking about that. And most recently, I started Youth Climate Safe, and it's a youth group that focuses on talking about how animal agriculture is harming our planet because it's not talked about as much as it should be. So yeah, that's really why like I started talking about the environment is because I realized like this is harming our planet so much, and there's still going to be future generations on this planet, so we can't leave them with the destroyed planet. So I need to start talking about this issue.
That is going to resonate deeply, I think, with Lasse. You were also an animal friend pretty much from beginning of your own memory. Do you remember the beginning of thinking that the world might not be a fair place for animals?
Yeah, I think once like I found out what was happening to them, that's really when I started thinking it. And it's so horrible with all that has to happen to them because they did nothing to us.
Lasse, I'm going to take that question to you. That first moment of thinking about animals and their experience in the world and why they are on your plate and what that means for you. Do you remember when those ideas started occurring to you?
I do
Yeah,
indeed. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Lasse. I'm gonna let you just take a moment. I hope that's okay, Genesis.
Great. Great. So great to be here with you today, Genesis. Very nice to meet you. You are indeed a hero already, at least my hero. I do remember that. I mean, but it was also something that I had to develop gradually. I always had a very innate, love and passion for animals, as Genesis also was expressing. But making the connection to what you eat also like came at a later stage. Um, and when I started putting that together, it became clear to me that was, a path I had to take. And like most other animal activists, we're talking about like the late 80s, early 1990s, like, the last century. The back then, like most of the big issues around animal issues were like animal experimentation, animals in entertainment circuses or zoos or whatever it might be, any kind of cruelty aspects, and not much was applied to the way we eat. So it was a process, definitely. But once I made that connection, I knew it was clear to me this was the way I needed to go, simply because it's where the biggest suffering is.
What Genesis was just talking about was that her mom said, well, I haven't been an activist before, but Genesis, from the way you describe it, it sounds like your mom was really open to all these new ideas that you were having. Lasso, what was your experience? And that was a really different time. You're talking about the 80s and the 90s and a conversation that maybe wasn't quite the same as it is in 2020. When you started to vocalize that concern about animals, what was the reaction that you encountered?
Well, there are several things of it. I mean, the first, it was always seen as a very pet project, so to speak, pun intended, to care about animals. It's like always like, well, there's development issues, there's human suffering, there's environmental issues, there is issues of equitable food distribution and whatever. There's no room to address the animal issue as well. That was kind of like the way it was laid out at the time, which of course isn't the right perspective because everything is interlinked. So that was that. It was seen as something in the periphery you couldn't care too much about unless you were a little bit an animal crazy person, as it was kind of coined at the time. The other thing was, of course, the food thing. It was interesting. We had Anna Lappe on a panel 2 days ago, and she was talking about her mom's first book, Diet for Small Planet, from 1971, where the recipes were full of things you had to add to a vegan or vegetarian diet, not to wither away, because you had to get all the proteins. And of course, now we know that is not the case. That's also why the recipes have been changed in the new edition that's coming out next year. But it was still very much in Denmark at the time the case. When I stopped eating meat, people were genuinely concerned about my health, whether I'd be able to like continue to build muscle and actually be fit. Or I was doing a lot of martial arts at the time, and people were like, "Can you actually do this?" And there was a lot of like teasing and bullying because every time there was a gathering and all the guys down from the gym got together, they would be having like big burgers and I'd be standing there. Maybe I brought a bag of carrots because there was nothing else available. But, things have changed a lot since then. And it's great to see how there's so much more awareness. And I would say Genesis is spot on when she talks about the need for people to know, because often people are just getting the wrong information.
What's really interesting between your two different experiences is that you're talking about how there might have not been anything else for you to grab. And Genesis, in your TED talk, which we're going to share the link for, you actually talked about how you still eat nuggets, but now they are vegan nuggets. So that really says like there's so much more available for people who want to make a transition. Genesis, the world is where it's at, and not everyone is on the same page as you. as a young person, when you encounter people who have ideas like the kinds that Les is talking about, this isn't the healthiest way forward, or this isn't good for you, or you're overreacting, do you hear any of those kinds of messages? And if you do, how do you deal with them?
Mhm. I don't hear it as often as I used to, but I still do sometimes hear that. But there's so many like facts and there's so many scientists, and if you look it up, it will pop up of how much of an impact animal agriculture is having on our planet. So if there's a bunch of facts, you can't really say like this isn't good for you or this isn't helping like with the climate issue right now because it shows and there's stuff that has been proven that it is really impacting our planet and it is good for your health. So there's facts like that that I can show people whenever they tell me that.
I want to do a little bit of a U-turn because this is a real opportunity for people to really get to know both of you. So I'm going to throw a question out there that isn't. We definitely have lots of room to talk about food choices and food system change, but so people know a little bit more about both of you. Who are the animal friends that have meant the most to you personally? Lasse, we can start with you if you like.
The animal friends, well, there are lots, as we talked about earlier, we have to start somewhere. And I was very inspired as a very young kid by like programs on BBC that would show a biologist engaging in nature, because that was kind of the biggest exposure. We're talking about the time before internet, right? So you only had was broadcast to you to reflect on and what you could read in books. But of course, like Diane Fossey, Jane Goodall, like the classics were really great. And also, I was very fortunate enough in the early 90s to attend, as it were, a conference in Rome, bringing together animal activists from across Europe. That's a long time ago now, but there were a lot of people there who were very inspirational. One of them, an old friend of mine, Adolfo Sanzolini, he was actually at the time doing so much and actually influencing policies in Italy and building a movement, which I at a very young age was very inspired by. So there has been certain elements in time and inspirations in my life.
But
And
as I understand, you were only about 17 years old when you started your own vegan organization or animal rights organization. Is that right?
well, I did not start it per se, but I kind of engaged in it. At that time, it was around animal experimentation, but also dealing with food choices, fur issues, and what have you. And yes, it was a very, I guess, different time. It was back in the day again before internet, where doing activism was getting out every Saturday and standing on the pedestrian streets, handing out leaflets and engaging in dialogue with people. That was kind of the way to meet people, or newspaper ads, or talks at schools, at libraries. It was a very different game at the time. It was harder to reach people, but I do feel what we did manage to get at the time was very deep engagement with people, as opposed to sometimes when you only can connect via online channels. It's less of a personal game.
Genesis, it must look really, really different for you. So Lasse is talking about is standing on a street corner, handing out pamphlets and arriving at libraries and schools for talks. I wonder what it looks like for you when you try to communicate some of your message to people, because I think the world has changed a lot in these 30 years.
Well, I did first start out giving out leaflets. I would do it pretty often, like the grocery store or like at protests and stuff like that. But right now I think the main platform that I've been using is Instagram, because everyone's on social media right now. So I can just simply post a picture and then it would just go around to a bunch of people and they're able to read my message. But that's been like the main thing that has been working for me is social media right now, and also like traveling to give talks, because that has been another thing like pre-COVID. But I would travel and give speeches, but yeah, mainly it's been on social media right now.
And when you connect with other young people, what are the big questions that they have for you? As speaking to a peer is such a completely different experience from being told by a teacher or a parent or somebody older than you. Actually having this friend or someone who is in your world have that conversation. I'd like to try and imagine what it's like when two 14-year-olds get together and talk about this. What are their concerns and questions? What are the kinds of things that they talk to you about?
They're just like confused on why they haven't heard about that issue, because it's such a huge issue that isn't talked about. So it's like why don't we all know about this? Because if more people knew, like some people just simply don't know about this. So if they knew, they would know like of how much of an impact it's having and why they should switch to a plant-based diet. So when I tell like youth about that, they really just like want to get active and do something about that issue. Because once like you know about that, like it's like what can I do, like how can I get involved? So then that's when I tell them like how they can get more involved with it. But mainly they're just like shocked on why they hadn't heard about this issue.
Okay, so a 14-year-old says to you, I've never heard about this before. I want to do something. What should I do?
Um, Normally I would tell them like they can switch to a plant-based diet and educate others, because that's a simple way that it can make a big impact. Because if you're telling one person about that, they're gonna remember that, and then they're gonna want to tell another person about that. So it's like a domino effect kind of, because a bunch of people are gonna know about this. But recently with my Youth Climate Save group, a lot of youth have been reaching out to me. And they've been wanting to start chapters, and we talk about how animal agriculture is harming our planet. And right now we have 63 chapters in 23 different countries. So I can tell them that they can reach out to Youth Climate Save and get involved with that also.
Wow, it's amazing to me that you decided to try and find more time for this by pulling yourself out of school, and that means that you are now responsible for doing all of your studies at home while also doing all of this outreach work, which is it really is a lot. I mean, you're a 14-year-old kid. Do you still have space to just go and be a kid?
Yeah, I still have time to like talk to friends and like mainly I found a balance between it, because at first it was kind of hard to like find out like time in between all my speaking engagements. But right now in quarantine, mainly I've been doing just like school and like still my activism, but I really found out how to like still hang out with friends but still be able to do my activism, which is what I love.
Lasse, I'm going to come to you because because you were involved in activism from a very young age, you also would have had to make sacrifices and choices about what you were going to be involved with. I don't know if this is just a preconception from me, but I have this feeling that once you know about the experience of animals, once you have this kind of knowledge in your mind, that's a very heavy thing for a young person to take in. Did you feel like you also still had space to be free and to just be a kid in spite of also being an activist engaging with these really tough issues?
Well, I certainly hope so. I did feel I had a good childhood, and I did feel I had was a positive person despite the deep knowledge of the suffering. And it is a lot to take in, right? When you start and I think often that is something that keeps people from really engaging in this. In a crude way to say it is that people. The reason why people are so engaging in and are not moving away from eating big amounts of animal protein, it could be either that they really don't care. It could also be that they don't know enough. They need the information, but a very big part of it is also denial, because it is a lot to take in, like to fully embrace what is going on all around us all the time, the sheer numbers of animals that are slaughtered. And that's irrespective of your engaging from an animal perspective, from an environmental, from a social justice perspective, equitable food distribution perspective, and so forth. It is a lot. And I think it's important to point out that, coming back to the point I made about being criticized for being kind of like an animal nut back in the day, that people often thought that animals was the only thing you really cared about. And that's definitely not the truth for me. And I think Genesis probably feels the same, which is that you care about all things. I care about human beings. I care about nature. I care about social justice. I care about all generations, and I care about animals. It's not that caring for one thing makes you less caring about another thing. But sometimes you need to look at like, where is the biggest suffering, or where's the place where I can make the biggest difference? And for me, my calculation was, well, I'm trying to be a voice for the voiceless, the animals, and to do my part. But as we can see with 50 by 40, we're trying to bring all these things together and saying it's all about alleviating suffering. It's all about making humans, animals, and nature coexist in the best way possible. And yes, trying to embrace that and deal with that at a very young age takes a lot of toll. And I commend Genesis for having started even younger than I did.
You have both had very different experiences, but I can hear that or very different paths into the work that you do right now. But I can hear that there are a lot of similarities. I want to ask you about the kind of conversation that we can have with young people to really enable them. Lasse, you're talking there about some of that "you must be crazy" conversation, or "you're going to be sick" conversation. Genesis, you're sounding a lot more positive. Your experience was possibly more supportive than the one that Lasse is describing. But for both of you, you would have some knowledge and insight to what young people need to hear when they emerge, when they start to become active on these issues. What can the adults around them, the teachers, the parents, the other adults in their world, what can they do? What should they communicate to them to help encourage that advocacy spirit? Genesis, maybe I could start with you.
I think first thing that I would say for parents is like, I think a lot of kids sometimes will question parents. Luckily my mom, like at first my mom didn't really want to tell me the truth. But that's when like I asked her like again, and that's when like she realized like, okay, I should tell her. But I think parents can really just tell the truth to their kids is if like they ask questions, and even if they don't, just that they know what they're eating, because if we don't know, then we just think it's food, but once we truly know, it's devastating. We don't want to eat it again. And then for teachers, if there is any like activists in their classrooms, just like empower them to like want to become an activist, or just help them with their activism and be supportive of that. And then just for like anyone, like they can support youth activists, because that really helps, and that's really helped get me to where I am right now, is a lot of support. So that's basically what you guys can do.
And what about the situation where what Les is describing, where a young person might be in an environment that says to them, "This is crazy. What are you doing? Oh, that's for loonies. What are you, stop being so silly." What should that young, because they don't have those adults around them who are enabling that activism, who are getting excited about what they do, but are rather telling them to stop. So the kind of situation that Lasse was describing. So what would you say to that young person? What should they do? How do they continue to grow as an advocate and an activist?
Mhm. They can reach out to youth, because there is a lot of youth activists right now. And being around youth and seeing how much of an impact they're making too, it would really inspire them to keep on going no matter what's going through their path right now.
Who are the activists that are inspiring you right now?
Um, I think Let me think. A lot of the youth that I've seen, there's so many youth that I realize that are so like passionate about this issue. So I think they're really inspiring me. Is just seeing how there's so many youth that really want to get active and use their voices.
Lasse, that's got to resonate with you. You have often said that you take a lot of hope when you see how many young people are getting informed and getting excited. I want to bring this question to you as well. What kinds of things do you think we can do to support young people who are emerging as advocates and activists in this space?
Yeah, I think basically it's about respect, mutual respect for other human beings. Just as we always say in the movement, we need to meet people where they are, not where we want them to be. And Jen and I, we had a great talk just before this session talking about how important it is to meet the farmers where they are. And I very much agree with that. But conversely, it's also very important that people who do not understand our point of perspective, our point of view, actually nonetheless are respectful and supportive, because they might not agree, but they can at least respect the opinion. And often people who have had a certain perspective for a long, long time, they will go into the default response to something. So they hear about, well, we should stop eating more meat. And straight away, they hear in the back of their heads what they have been told through media and through peers, or what they would actually like to believe themselves. And they impose that upon the person in front of them, instead of just saying, okay, this person might have a point, before I start trying to push them away for something they actually want to do or something achieve. Maybe I should just have a reflection. Maybe I should like Genesis said, look up online and just find some good information and see what the truth really is before I start doing that. I think that's a really good first step.
I'm going to ask a question on your behalf, Lasse. I hope you won't mind. So the mission of 50 by 40 is to be achieved by 2040. Here we are in 2020. We've got 20 years ahead. Genesis, what do you think should be focused on and done over the next 20 years?
I think I would like to see more people talking about how animal agriculture is harming our planet, because it's really not talked about that much. Like right now, the main topic has been fossil fuels, which is harming our planet. But there is so many other issues that are truly harming our planet, just like fossil fuels. So I think this one is more like personal, because like when like you're talking about how people are eating, it's kind of like, oh, like I eat meat, so you kind of feel like it's like an attack to you. But I think that we just really need to realize like this is harming our planet, so we really need to start talking about this. So I hope in 20 years this is just talked about, so it's normal, so that everyone knows about this, so it's not like a shock. And I hope that people will look back and be like, we used to eat that, like that's disgusting, why would we do that? So I hope it'll be like a joke soon.
Well, that's got to lift your heart, Lasse, the idea of sitting around and one day laughing about the way the world used to be and all the changes that have taken place. So we'll have to check in with you in 20 years and see how it went. There are so many questions coming in, and we have a good 20 minutes left to really get into them. There are folks writing from all their different places. We've got folks in this conversation from 60 different countries. I'm going to start with Liu, who says, Genesis, I'm a huge fan. What are you most excited about in the future?
I'm most excited about just to see like if the world is gonna be any different from right now, because the world is kind of just like all over the place right now. Like we're just like we need to get it together. So I hope that like the planet will be a lot different, and hopefully climate change will be a little bit better than how it is right now.
I want to ask you the same question, Lasse. What are you excited about in the future?
Well, I'm excited about, excuse me, I'm excited about people like Genesis, and I'll tell you why. Because, one big difference I see now compared to when I started out is that people are much more aligned about the different aspects of what we're trying to deal with are aligned. So somebody like Genesis here, she's knowledgeable. You're knowledgeable about animals, about the environment, about people, and you see how it's all interlinked. And the same goes for other youth activists like Greta Thunberg, for instance. She's a climate change advocate, but she's also very much engaged in human rights issues and in animal issues, because there's this understanding that everything is interlinked. And I think that's a big change, because back in the day, it used to be much more divided up, like you're about animals, you're about development, you're about environment. This has changed, and it gives me so great hope to see that there's so many amazing young people who are carrying the torch forward, and it makes me sleep much better at night.
Yeah, me too. Totally. We're going to go to Tori Wong. This question is for both of you. Lasse and Genesis, you have both been so influential in the animal welfare and environmental movements. What do you both believe is the most impactful tactic to make lasting change? And then she gives some examples. Corporate engagement, influencing. Oh, the question is gone. There is. Corporate engagement, influencing policy, or individual change. So that's a really complicated question, but it really is about where you think that people should be investing their time and effort. Genesis, I'm going to begin with you, if that's okay.
I feel like the main thing, I feel like there's so many like focuses on this, but like education, I'd say, because there's some people that just like simply don't know, like I said. So once you like tell them about this, then it will like get to more people, and we all need to be educated first before we really truly know about an issue. So I think education would be a main one.
You seem to be very, Genesis, this is to you. You seem to be very optimistic and deeply convinced that if people know the truth about where their food is coming from, that they will naturally respond to that with compassion. Is that true? Is that the way that you think about things?
Mhm. Because it happened to me and I've seen it happen to a bunch of other kids. So I think that there are some people that would kind of be like, oh, like I know where my food's coming from, but will just like look the other way about it. But there are a bunch of people that are really focusing on this and are realizing like this is what I'm eating. Like I need to stop eating this.
Lessa, I'm going to bring this question to you. So Tori Wong was asking about where you believe the most impactful place is to make lasting change, if that's engagement with corporate engagement, influencing policy, or individual change.
That's a very big question. Thanks for that. I would say it's all of it, because you have to, it's about market powers, it's about regulations, and it's about how people, what people are demanding. And you need to address all of them at the same time, preferably. It depends on what your expertise is, I would say. In 50 by 40, we're trying to address all these issues, but we are not specialists on all the issues. Because if you want to be an expert both on behavioral change and on policy and on demand side and corporate engagement, you end up with the good old like a jack of all trades is the master of none. So I think it's important to find out what is your strength. Are you a good policy person? Are you a good advocate in terms of getting individuals to change? Or are you somebody who's really good at making those corporations change the way they do things? And then the important thing is to bring these different aspects together so you can sit down and compare notes. And that's kind of the basis for 50 by 40. We bring all the different experts within all these spheres together and try to make sure there's alignment, and we develop our notes together. But so specifically to the question, I would say find out where you're best at and then go for that.
That's really what it's at. There isn't what you're saying is there's not a single solution here. Everybody has a skill set. Everybody has a place where they're able to be politically active or economically responsible or whatever it is that they're going to engage with. Have I understood that correctly?
That's correct. And then just one more thing I wanted to say, it's about credibility. I mean, like Genesis has said, be the change you want to see. If you know your stuff, and if you are living your values, and you just influence people in a positive, engaging way, that's a good place to start, irrespective of which of those areas you're entering into.
You have just opened the door for our next question. I love this question. This is from Arturo, who says, Genesis, my daughter is 6 years old, has been raised vegan. She is also a huge fan. Can you talk about your experience with your classmates, your friends, in and out of school being vegan?
So when I went vegan, I was 6. I wish I was vegan since birth. But my little brother's vegan since birth. But when I went vegan, like it was a while ago when I was vegan. So it wasn't like talked about, so people thought it was kind of weird at first. Like right now, people know about veganism more than they did. So it's not as like not accepted as it used to be. But they would kind of be like, oh, like she eats grass, or what else would they say? They would like just like make it seem like if I ate like a rabbit is what they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would bring in all these foods and it wasn't like those type of foods, but they would kind of just be like confused on why I was eating it. But then that's when like I told them. And then there's only one time where a kid was just like really like shocked on what I was eating. But ever since then, I think right now veganism is more accepted than it used to be, and it's not as much of a weird thing. Like, you think it's cool right now, so I think it's really cool how it's more accepted than it used to be.
How about birthdays? How does it work at a birthday party for you?
Everyone knows that I'm vegan now. Like at first I was kind of like timid about it. Like I wouldn't really say anything about it. Like if people would ask me, I would say like that I was vegan, but then I realized that I should just talk about it like I'm vegan. So like that's a good thing. So then that's when I started telling people about it. So now when I go to parties, most people will bring like vegan pizza for me or bring like vegan cupcakes. But if they don't like school parties or anything like that, I'll normally bring like my own food, and then vegan food looks so good compared to other food. So then all the kids will be looking at my food and they'll be like, how come she got that and I didn't get that? So they feel like they just got robbed. So I think it's good to like my own stuff.
I love that. I love that. What a great way to do a little bit of activism by accident. What a wonderful answer. I'm going to just check. There's an extension to that question. Um, Curvel Baird, I hope I'm saying that name right, says, Arturo, it's amazing that you raised your daughter vegan and that she has someone like Genesis representing her on a large platform. Have other parents been supportive or not about how you raise your daughter vegan? Oh, well, that's a great question to ask. And I will encourage you, Curvel, to take that question forward on our app, which is available on the webpage. You can ask Arturo directly and have that exchange about the experiences of parenting. It's a terrific question. We're going to go now to a question from Lisa. This is also for Genesis. Do you find it easier to encourage young people to change their diets rather than convincing adults to make such changes? That's interesting.
Mhm. I think youth are more accepting of it. Adults is a little bit harder because I've gotten people telling me that they've eaten meat their whole life, so it's hard for them to change. But my mom and my dad ate meat their whole lives before they were vegan, and it wasn't that hard to change. It wasn't that hard to adapt to it. So if they could do it, anyone can do it. You can go vegan at any age, but I think youth are the ones that are really more accepting of it because they're like realizing like this is what I'm eating. Like I'm eating pigs, I'm eating chickens, I'm eating cows. And especially when like you spend time with them, you see how they have emotions. And we watch videos of them all the time, like cute little pig videos, cute little chicken videos. And then we all look at it like if we wouldn't eat our pets that we love so much, so why are we eating other species? But for adults, I think they're more like hard to talk to about this because like now they're like more accepting, especially parents, because like all parents want their kids to have a thriving like planet. But I think adults are kind of just hard to talk to because they feel like it's like a personal attack to them, but youth are more accepting of it right now.
Lasse, that has got to ring in a really positive way for you because we've spoken in the past about ridicule around the dinner table and how that can be a place where people are educated into not following their hearts or not following their values. I wonder if you'd like to also lean into the question from Lisa. Do you find it easier to encourage young people to change their diets rather than convincing adults to make such changes, which is interesting in your work because you really work in the world of adults?
I do indeed. Yes, it's a great question. And well, I agree with Genesis about the differences there. And human beings are creatures of habit, right? Things get ingrown, they're used to doing things in a certain way. And there's also the aspect of denial or face work, if you will. Because to put it quite simply, if somebody changes their mind about something, it is kind of like saying, I was wrong before. And for a lot of people, that's difficult to stomach, pun intended. Whether it's an adult like a peer or whether it's particularly a politician, if they are told, if they come forward and say, I'm going to change this thing, say, well, you've been eating meat for 30 years and you said it was great, there was nothing wrong with it, and now you changed. Were you wrong for 30 years? And a lot of people, it's difficult to admit that. So I think what we need to really, really do is help people feel comfortable making that change and not doing the shaming or the blaming, particularly with politicians. Actually say, well, isn't it great this person has changed their dietary habits or their policy? And that will be a very strong encouragement to make a change and not for them to feel scared to be too vulnerable and expose themselves when they change their minds.
We have another. This is. I can't believe we're already at 10:40 in Eastern Time and 4:40 in Central Europe. We only have a few minutes left. I'm going to go to a question from Alan Ramos. He says, "Hi Genesis, thank you for the amazing work. Can you help us better understand the perspective of your generation regarding climate change and food choices? Is a movement like Fridays for Future representative of people?" Oh, my screen is jumping around. Representative of people who are currently your age. Well, that's really interesting. So we saw people with the Fridays for Future, we saw people pouring into the streets. I've never seen anything like it. Young people just saying, well, we don't have a vote. This is how we're going to express ourselves. We're going to get out on the street. But what Alan is wondering is if that kind of movement is really representative of what's happening in your world.
Yeah, I think that it's like bringing a lot of attention to it because youth are really getting active and that wasn't really like common. So just seeing how like we're making these choices, like instead of like just finding out this issue is harming our planet, like we want to get active and do something about this. It's like, how do we help? Not just like let me switch what I'm doing. Like it's like, how can I get active and how can I help right now? So I think that it's making a lot of adults kind of scared that youth are starting to do this because we used to like be like scared to do all these things and it wasn't super common. But now it's like youth are really turning into leaders. And I think that this is a really good thing because youth are so powerful and our voices are so powerful, and just know that they're being heard. I think it's a really amazing thing to see.
I love the optimism in that answer. Lasse, I'm just going to give you I know that you're not in the generation that did the Fridays for Future Action, but you were a part of helping amplify that movement. I don't know if you want to extend a little bit there and speak to some of what Genesis just talked about.
Well, I just want to make the point that I think it's important to keep empowering young people and not be afraid to hand over the torch and actually ensure that the leadership grows. And I think a lot of people in my generation and older are a bit concerned about letting go of that power, because that has been a power structure that's been in place for such a long time. Particularly when you look at the North-South balance and gender issues and ethnicity. And I think it's so important that to make the point that the powers are changing and embrace it and work with it and actually feel great about it. Feel it's great there are new leaders that are taking over and are doing things much better than we did. I mean, Genesis is light years ahead of me when I was 14. And that's just so amazing to see. Again, that makes me feel very hopeful about the future. So we should need to let go and give the power to the people who will carry it forward.
I am going to give you both a very last question. This one comes from Uskin W. Gankus. I hope I said that name correctly. And I love this. This is sort of, how do you put this into practice in your everyday life? Genesis and Lasse, I am in a young couple. My wife likes to eat meat, beef, whereby my personal diet is fish and vegetables. How can you argue to convince my wife to change her diet? Lasse, I'm going to start with you, and that way we can give Genesis the final word.
Well, you need to really look into what your wife really is about. Is it health? Is it compassion? Is it all of it? And just in a very gentle way, when she is ready for it, just talk to her about the facts and just be honest about the situation we find ourselves in. And I'm sure Genesis will speak to this as well. Make sure all the food that you present instead of the beef is very delicious. And these days, there's so much great stuff out there.
Genesis, I'm going to pass this question to you as well. So let's just pretend that you're sitting at the table, or you're trying to have this conversation. This is a man sitting down with his wife. They have different food choices. How would you help convince his wife to change her diet?
There it depends because everyone's different. But these like issues have to do with so many different things like it can help with. Depending on what she's interested in, like health, it reduces a bunch of risk of getting cancer and heart disease. So those are one thing. For the animals, if she's eating beef, I think Cowspiracy, that one I couldn't finish it, but if she's eating beef, that one really make her like think about what she's eating more, because then like when like you look at it, like you see like not just like meat, but you see the animal. And the very last one is the climate, which is super important, and if she wants a thriving planet to live on, she should switch her diet to a plant-based diet.
Wow, well, that's amazing. My favorite is the part where you talked about the birthday party. So maybe he can sit across from her with his amazing, beautiful meal and be like, "You got robbed." Thank you so much, Genesis. As a last thing, I just want to ask you, what are you most hopeful about in the world at this moment in time?
Um, I think the main thing that I'm really hopeful about would be youth, because I think now we're really seeing how many youth are really wanting to get active and make a change. And youth are really starting to become leaders, and you're starting to see more youth speaking up and being on these big platforms. So I think that that's really amazing to see, because that's really going to make a huge change seeing youth.
Well, that really means that the two of you are very much on the same page, in spite of the very different generations and very different worlds that you live in. That both of you, Lasse, you're talking about how we have to really try to create space for young people and let them take this movement forward in the way that really speaks to them. And Genesis, you're saying we are right here, we are ready. The space is ready to be taken by young people who are becoming leaders in their own right. Wow, so inspiring, and I can't believe we are already out of time. Genesis, this is a drawing that we have a sketch artist, Mike Brennan, is with us, and he has been doing sketches of people as they speak, and this is his drawing of you, and you taking part and sharing all of your wonderful ideas and your experience. Such a thrill to have both of you here today and to talk to us about how the world of advocacy has really changed and how you live that in your own lives. I couldn't be more grateful. Thank you so much on behalf of everybody who's taken part, and thank you to everybody who's submitted questions. Thank you really to both of you for sharing your life stories with us today.